Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show. Welcome back, everyone. Today on the Produce Moms Podcast, we are talking about some new innovation that's helping with eliminating food waste and helping us all make more sustainable choices as consumers. And it's really a fun episode because we are welcoming back a previous guest. So today our guests include Aiden Mouat. He is the co-founder and CEO of Hazel Technologies. For those of you that have been listening to the Produce Moms Podcast for the last couple years, you will recognize him and his story from episode 67. We are also welcoming to the show Patrick Cortes. Patrick is with Mission Produce. He is the Senior Director of Business Development. We're thrilled to be working with this company in a brand partnership. And today, we're actually going to talk about a partnership, a new partnership between Hazel Technologies and Mission Produce. It's called Avalast. And you know what? We're so excited to welcome both of these guys to the show. Aiden, please say hello. And then Patrick, I'd like to welcome you on too. So Aiden.
Hey, Lori. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, thank you. And Patrick.
Lori, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you, guys. No, this is going to be a great show, and we're gonna have both of you on to share some thoughts about a few questions and help all of our listeners understand more about Hazel Technologies and Mission Produce, but most importantly, this new partnership that your organizations have formed in Avalast. So let's start. Aiden, let's start with you. A little bit about yourself, a little bit about Hazel Technologies, and then we'll pass the mic to Patrick to do the same for Mission.
Sure. So my background is largely in chemistry. I did my PhD at Northwestern in 2016. And the year before that, in 2015, myself and a number of other founders from Northwestern started Hazel Technologies about March of 2015. And the goal there was to develop a new type of technology to allow us to stop food from going bad and reduce the massive spoilage waste problem that the world faces. Every year, close to $1 trillion in produce goes bad before it can be eaten. It's nearly a third of all produce harvested every year. And in the era of climate change, if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases just behind the U.S. and China. So it's a pretty massive problem that
Wow.
we
Yeah.
and then more than that, we wanted to tackle it from a sustainability perspective. We wanted to create technologies that reduce chemical load in the food supply and increase value and increase longevity without hurting anybody or the environment. So that's us.
That's great. Thank you, and welcome back. And Patrick, tell us more, please, about Mission Produce and your role there in business development.
Sure. Mission Produce, we are the largest grower, packer, shipper of Hass avocados in the world. We're very proud of the business we've developed globally. We have obviously our global sales office here in Oxnard, California. We've got a European office in Holland, position in Asia as well. We've got 9 ripening centers throughout North America where we offer state-of-the-art ripening for all of our retailers and food service customers. And in addition to that, sourcing from California, Mexico, we are the largest grower of Peruvian avocados in the world and continuing to expand our source and our reach. And I think in this endeavor that we've entered in with Hazel was a real perfect fit for us as we continue to try to add value to the supply chain, help with the problem, and do what's right for the planet as well. So it makes sense, the path we're going down with Hazel.
Yeah, it sure does make sense. So why don't, Patrick, let's stick with you to kind of kick things off today and tell us a little bit more about how the partnership even got started. How did you guys end up bringing Avalast together?
Yeah, so we have a pretty extensive R&D in-house department here at Mission Produce, and I work closely with our head of R&D. And a few years ago, he said, "Hey, there's this interesting startup in Chicago, and they have a pretty effective, easy implementable, if that's even a word, way to delay the ripening or extend the shelf life of a ripe avocado, Hazel Technologies." And so we started doing some testing together, and we found, as we tweaked and did some fine tuning, that we were able to definitely get some positive extension of shelf life and preservation, extension of the internal quality as well of avocados. So the idea being we could reduce the throwaway that a retailer or food service or a restaurant would have. And in addition to that, the consumer could have some added days to enjoy a ripe avocado, further experiencing positive experiences with avocados, which obviously would drive category growth. And
Sure.
so I think, obviously Aiden can speak to a lot of what Hazel does in their space, but it worked out very well for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so the days where the avocado is ripe is extended, or the whole ripening process?
Yeah, all of it, soup to nuts.
Okay.
I mean, if we apply it prior to ripening, we can extend the hard shelf life, sometimes a week to 10 days. And then once the fruit is ripened and we treat with Avalast and Hazel's technology, we can extend the ripe shelf life, depending on the time of the year, anywhere from 2 to 4 days.
Right.
And then the other nice thing too is that at ambient, when a customer takes fruit home, we've all done it, right? We've all bought something at the grocery store. We forgot about it on the windowsill, and we see it behind something. It's probably gone bad. Well, we've been able to extend the internal quality of the avocado as well, so that there's more of an opportunity for the consumer to utilize the fruit before it goes bad.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I actually literally just did it this morning when I was making my breakfast. I was, went to open an avocado and I'm like, I forgot about it. It went too long. It's black on the inside now. So yeah, there's nothing more frustrating. And as it relates to food waste and, budget and everything else, like it's all around just such a loss. So I love the work that you all are doing to help solve it. I mean, that's really what this is. It's a solution to a global critical issue.
Yeah, and to add to that, with what we're dealing with the pandemic, people are shopping less. And if
True.
they have the confidence that instead of shopping, 2 to 3 times a week, they're shopping 1 to 2, if they have the confidence to know they can still buy avocados that they're going to be able to utilize through the week, that's a very compelling proposition.
Yeah, so true. All right, Aiden, I've got to ask you, put you in the hot seat now, okay?
Let's do it.
All right. So I think I maybe have brought this up to you before, but I have to put on my mom hat here and say, what is Avalast? I don't really like the thought of technology in my food, so help everyone understand exactly what this product is and, how and why it's safe for moms and households and families.
Sure. That's it's a very important question for us. I lead off with the fact that my PhD is in chemistry, and I understand when people sort of go, that's alarming. We don't want to think about chemistry in food.
Right. Yeah.
But unfortunately, the evolution of the agricultural system is such that chemistry pervades how we get food from point A to point B. Right. And what we're here to do really is to do it better, right? We want to make sure that we can reduce reliance on harmful chemical load and other processes that are environmentally and inefficient in a human health context. And how we came to that ability is we designed a technology that actually works atmospherically. So at no point do we actually apply anything to the Avalast fruit at all. There's no contact. It's not a dip. It's not a wax. It's not a coating. It's not a spray or anything like that. Rather, we do what's called biomimetic chemistry, where we're able to manipulate the atmosphere around the avocados in order to control these essential biological functions in a way that we like and is more regulated in terms of metabolism. So it mirrors, as you can probably guess from the word biomimetic, it mirrors a natural process. Avocados produce ethylene, which is a gaseous chemical compound, in the process of growing and ripening and so forth. And all we've done is introduce a controlled concentration, a very small controlled concentration of the antidote to ethylene into the atmosphere of those avocados. And there's a lot of engineering and a lot of fancy stuff that goes into it. And Patrick could tell you horror stories all day long about, how do we make these things work in these complex logistical environments where produce is moving in and out quite rapidly and you have different ripening processes and so forth. But at the end of the day, that's why we partnered with Mission, was to get a strong handle on how to maximize the impact of this relatively sophisticated technology, supply chains for consumers in meaningful ways. So, our technology leaves no residue. It's not harmful in and of itself. It's completely bioorthogonal. It's deployed at concentrations of less than a ppm in the ambient atmosphere. It's an antidote that has been used on the market for nearly 30 years at this point, very successfully in the Apple industry. And what we've done is take that commercial success, but more importantly, that environmentally relevant and harmless success, and applied it to new crops like the avocado to create Avalast. So at the end of the day, what is Avalast? Avalast is what we're calling a superior type of avocado. You could think of it in some ways as a smart avocado, even a biohacked avocado. Where we've used atmospheric controls to prolong that ripe eating window that Patrick was talking about, that period of customer delight, and do it without adding anything new into the food supply whatsoever.
Right.
In fact, and I think you'll probably be pretty interested to know this, one of the fun added benefits of using this type of atmospheric biochemistry is an ability to reduce reliance on harmful pesticides and fungicides that are applied to avocados prior to harvesting in order to maximize their shelf life. So, an example would be a fungus called anthracnose, which as of last year was a critical criterion for avocado shelf life produced out of California. To fight that fungus, a lot of farmers will use things like a conventional fungicide, which is potentially harmful if there's a sufficient amount of residue left on the avocado.
Mm-hmm.
Using a technology like ours, however, you can get the same shelf life parameters or better without having to apply a spray of that type. And so as a result, we're actually reducing the chemical load of food by using a cleaner and more sophisticated form of chemistry. So that's just an example of how we believe this meshes quite nicely and neatly with desire for transparency, but ultimately for health and safety.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Help me understand the journey a little bit more. And again, folks, episode 67, we have an entire episode with Aiden on what is Hazel Technologies. And so please go there if you want more information, because we're scratching the surface in a way as we talk today. But Aiden, help us understand the process here, because it is atmospheric chemistry, correct? Am I understanding the process correctly when I say that? Yeah. Do you contain it? Like, does it get contained when it's growing at the avocado ranches? As well as, I can definitely see how the containment would work pretty easily once you get to the packing houses. It's a matter of putting everything in a storage unit, or on a tractor trailer container, all of those, or even in a box, if you want to get down to the box level, that all makes sense. Does anything happen at the ranch level when the avocados are on the trees?
Boy, that is a dense question, Lori.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. So I guess what I'll separate it out into, because there's a lot of interesting distinctions to make in the market. But what I'll separate it out into is, there's what we think of as in-field application, and then there's what we think is out-of-field application, right? So a lot of the environments you're talking about, packing houses, sheds, distribution centers, DCs, things like that, those are all environments where the product can profitably be used. And we don't typically do in-field applications, but you should also be aware that one of the, guiding principles of post-harvest technology as a general is, minimizing the amount of time that a harvested crop spends out of a controlled environment, right? So the whole industry is focused on, hey, how quickly can I get this fruit off the tree and into a packing house and then do what I need to from there with it. So we fit quite neatly into that regime. And I think Patrick had sort of mentioned earlier that one of the things that impressed Mission in this process was ease of use in the technology.
Yeah.
We believe that that's a critical factor because, especially with avocados, you have a very complex supply chain. You have lots of different growing regions servicing lots of different countries and just hundreds of international supply chains. And a lot of those environments, look different. Sometimes, the picking and packing practices in Peru and Mexico and the U.S. don't quite look the same. So to be able to have flexibility and control over how the application is performed in a given environment. And that's one of the things that we really provide a very strong handle on is we have great control over how the product is applied kinetically, and to use a chemical term, which allows us to make effective applications in a wide variety of environments. So we don't really interface with the trees themselves.
Right.
Pretty much any environment after that, up to and including the retail and even the consumer environment, are areas where our technology can be effectively applied.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That helps a lot. Now, Patrick, for you, why is Mission doing this? How is this helping food waste? Avalast being this. How is Avalast helping food waste?
Yeah. So the question as to why, first and foremost, it's the right thing to do, with everything going on and trying to get more to circular economies and those sorts of things. It's what we need to be doing as stewards. But then, the next level of it is, at the end of the day, we want to add value to our supply chain, meaning not only, getting it to our DCs from the field, but also to our customer base and the end consumer. And if you've got a retailer who has 5 or 6 or 7% throwaways, that fruit's just being put in a dumpster, and you can effectively reduce that to less than 1%, you're making a financial benefit to that retailer. You're reducing your carbon footprint because that's less avocados you have to go reharvest and put through the supply chain. And then you're also creating more benefit for the end consumer. I mean, obviously, Hazel Technologies has a lot of solutions for a lot of commodities, with Hass avocados just being one of them. But in our space, if we can continue to increase positive interactions with avocados, we're going to grow the category. I mean, right. Avocados as a whole right now, we're the darling in produce. It's no lie. But that being said, we can always look to continue to grow the category because we don't want to be complacent. We want everybody in America and around the world to have avocados daily, if so be it. And Hazel and Avalast helps us get there.
Yeah, it sure does. Now, let's talk. You mentioned the consumer. So important. It's really our primary constituent here at the Produce Mom. So what can the end consumer expect with Avalast now being, part of the grocery store? Are the end consumers even going to know? Are you guys if the avocado has Avalast?
So right now, obviously there's a lot still being worked on, and a lot of it's going to end up being on what the retailer wants to do. I think the key benchmark, Lori, that we needed to hit was we needed a technological solution to extend shelf life with which the end consumer does not have to interact with it, meaning they need to have the same experience they normally do. You mentioned the avocado that had gone bad. Lori, when we want you to go buy avocados, we don't want you to have to do anything different. Because If you do, then we've lost, because we know that's going to be a difficult challenge for us to try to educate the consumer on. So what we want to do is have the added benefit of the extended shelf life. If we can tell a retailer, you can potentially have 2 to 4 more days to sell that fruit, that's a virtual lifetime to a retailer. And then if we can say to the end consumer, Lori, that avocado you bought or you try to use today, cut black, potentially, had it been treated with Avalast, you may have had a different experience.
Right.
And while we like to obviously educate the public and let them know, hey, this avocado is going to last longer, the idea is to get those intended results as if nothing has changed throughout the supply chain.
Yeah, you want it to be a seamless experience, especially when especially because of how avocados are sitting as it relates to consumer perception and the sales and everything else. It's a slippery slope to disrupt that. But, and I do think too, just putting on my mom hat and putting on my industry professional hat, there's a reason why our industry doesn't necessarily include everything that it takes to get your fruits and vegetables to the grocery store in the consumer facing marketing. And that is universal. That's not only in the produce department. I mean, most consumers have no clue what it takes to process a box of cereal. The same way there's very little awareness or understanding of what takes place on the farm, the packing shed, the whole supply chain, that whole path to purchase. So I do think that I applaud you both for your willingness to be so transparent and take advantage of platforms like the Produce Moms and this podcast recording today to welcome those hot seat questions, answer them, and, make sure that you have that resource available, should the consumer want to know more. And so I agree with the approach. I agree completely with the approach because it is something that could easily lend to consumer confusion. And at the end of the day, all produce is good for you. Anyone listening to this show today, I want you to know that if you're making a purchase from the produce department, if you are bringing a fruit or a vegetable back into your home to feed your family, you're making an excellent choice. And it's important that you understand what's happening within the supply chain with partnerships like what we're showcasing today with Avalast and Hazel and Mission, or anything else in the produce industry that you're kind of getting a stronger understanding of through our platform. So we're glad you're here, and we're gonna continue the conversation now. Aiden, I'm going to ask you about what do you think consumers need to be concerned about? I mean, you've built your whole, you have your PhD in chemistry, and it's probably chemicals and food is one of the top concerns that we field at the Produce Moms. So what do consumers need to be concerned about as it relates to their food and new technologies like Hazel?
Boy, you're just coming in hot with some of these questions.
Well, I told you it's the hot seat.
Yeah, all right. No. I mean, I think everything you just said is fantastic, because we when we started this company, the idea was that transparency is everybody's friend at the end of the day, right? We knew it was always a difficult conversation regarding what science in the food supply not only is doing currently, but what it has done in the past, and why people have some of these fears. There are definitely historical problems that have emerged as a result of many poor choices being made, not just by scientists and not even just by businesses, but sometimes even by the regulators themselves. And
yes,
you can see a recent example of that with the dicambra situation, where the EPA registration for dicambra was just recently revoked by a U.S. Court of Appeals. So the EPA got a data packet, they reviewed a data packet, they said, hey, we think this is going to be fine, we're going to give this a certain amount of approval. And then it turned out that they had sort of grossly misinterpreted that data packet, requiring a federal body to step in and revoke that registration. So you've got all these examples where, paying attention and increasing the amount of transparency around the conversation needs to happen, because we just can't feed 8, 9, 10 billion people without the influence of chemistry.
Right.
Historical example, I think I probably talked about this in the last episode too, but I'll just refresh everybody's memory. The single biggest transformative event that's happened in agriculture, probably in the last 500 years or so, is the development of a single chemical process called the Haber-Bosch process. It's a process that we use to convert nitrogen into ammonia, which then provides the nitrogen source for most of our fertilizer. And to give you an idea of how impactful that process is, it's estimated that today, 1 out of every 2 people that's alive on the planet is alive only because of that one process. That's how many calories it's generated for the planet.
Wow.
So we literally doubled world population in a century because somebody got the clever idea to use an iron catalyst to convert nitrogen to ammonia. So when you talk about scaled agriculture, the perspective has to be different. It has to be not, hey, let's try to do this without chemistry, because quite frankly, we don't have the land resources and the nutrient resources to do that with our current world population. It needs to be, how do we force chemistry to be the best it can possibly be in solving this process and mitigate all of the harmful acts that have occurred since we've discovered the role of a wide variety of agricultural chemicals. So, with that in mind, I wrote a opinion piece a little while ago, and I thought it was pretty interesting. It had to do with what are common chemicals that a consumer of produce ingests frequently.
Okay.
And I only included in that list organic chemicals that are commonly found as part of the natural aging process of an apple. And it includes a stunning number of chemicals that if you were to look them up online, you would see that they're employed as industrial solvents, and they have all kind of carcinogenic properties, and they're quite nasty. Everything from ethanol to ethyl acetate and acetone, hemiacetals. You've got longer chain acids, acetic acid. You've got formic acid. You've got a lot of compounds in there that if you were to just isolate that compound and consider it a pure component, it'd be a pretty nasty thing to ingest. So you have to ask yourself the question, why then is that a completely acceptable part of natural physiological chemistry? That's just what the apple does when you leave it by itself. That doesn't even include anything else. And the answer is it always comes down to dosage. It always comes down to exposure rate, right? And this is how the EPA looks at chemical exposure as well. They talk about, well, here's an acute exposure limit. If you're exposed to too much of compound X, that's going to be harmful. They talk about chronic exposure limits. If you're exposed to a low amount of compound X over a very long period of time, here's how that could be harmful. And be mindful of how that interacts with our food supply, because accumulation of various things can be as dangerous as acute exposures and so forth and so on. So these are all really, really intricate concepts. I actually don't really expect the average consumer to understand the sheer amount of chemistry going on behind the scenes, even naturally speaking. You have to bear in mind, of the most toxic compounds on the planet, 70 or 80% of them are naturally produced in plants already. Right? So, you can't go out there and say, well, I'm only going to eat things that absolutely have never touched a chemical compound, because if you end up eating too many apple seeds, you're going to find yourself succumbing to cyanide poisoning.
Right. I mean, we've actually experienced that, Aiden, when folks will ask us, oh, my avocado is, super rock hard green. How do I ripen it? And we will respond saying, oh, well, these fruits, they naturally emit, higher levels of ethylene. It's like, whoa, they don't want to, ethylene, is that something I fill my car up with? I don't want that next to my, so I can empathize with what you're saying, it was actually a motivating factor to starting this podcast and resourcing the leaders in the industry, because
and this is the thing, you're doing the thing that I'm growing towards. It needs to be done, which is opening a dialogue and involving all the stakeholders in the supply chain, right? The technology providers have been sort of secret and nobody quite knows about them for a long time. It's just what you were saying, is it's so much information, it's difficult to ascertain. But when partnerships like this, when a company like ours, which is doing, unabashed and pure biochemistry, and we can interact with a trusted food provider, somebody who's been in the market, who leads the market, frankly, to create the market.
Yeah, right.
You have a conversation, and then somebody like you who's out there disseminating that information to the consumers. This is the type of dialogue that I hope will give consumers the confidence to understand that it will be very difficult for them to understand everything about the chemistry of their food, but they can trust providers to do what's best for them. And I think we need that kind of purity and integrity as part of this process. That's really why we started Hazel in the first place.
I love that. Well, so, let's keeping that consumer top of mind, Patrick, where can consumers find Mission Avocados? Where can they go to learn more about Avalast and your growing practices at Mission?
Sure. Yeah. Basically every major retailer across the country and in Canada, you can find Mission Avocados, both traditional and club stores. And if you also want to go to worldsfinestavocados.com, you can learn more information, not only about Mission and our growing regions, but also Avalast as well, in terms of the effects. And, we're continuing to roll this technology out as we're getting successful trials done. And in addition to the retail landscape, Lori, it's also been critical to help us open new markets. Aiden talks about the supply chain and how challenging it is. Getting to India is not very easy,
right?
And especially by boat. And the ability of Avalast as potentially opening that door to a country and a segment of the population globally that don't really interact with avocados that much is extremely compelling and interesting to us. So it's amazing the technology that Hazel has come up with and the applications throughout our supply chain. And Aiden mentioned the stakeholders. There are a lot of them, and we have the ability to satisfy almost all of those stakeholders with a very easily implementable solution for our very complex supply chain.
I love that. Yes. And I already can say, especially after the experience I had this morning when I was making breakfast, I'm looking forward to bringing this Avalast avocado product into my home. So thank you. And gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our show. But Aiden knows this, and I've been putting you in the hot seat all day, so you get the final word today. Patrick, thank you so much for being part of this. And, please say goodbye to our listeners today. Patrick, we'll start with you, and then we'll let Aiden have the closing thoughts and final words.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. We're very excited about our partnership with Hazel, and I look forward to continuing to develop and extend the shelf life and quality of avocados around the world.
I wanted to share a little story. A friend of mine in New York texted me the other day, and he says, just finished eating an avocado, and I had to go back to the trash can to verify that indeed it was a Mission avocado because it was so good I couldn't believe. Oh yeah, we're doing this thing right. So I really loved what you said when you said that it's never a bad thing to eat produce. I think that's completely true. I think that everybody should have that level of confidence and should always be buying fresh and should always have access to the best tasting and the healthiest stuff. That's why we're out here trying to do what we do. And I just wanted to share that little anecdote about Mission because, we're out here because we really believe in the food. Food is a tremendous industry. It's the only industry on the planet that touches every single one of us every day of our lives. And I think of it as the central industry. And we're just very proud to be a part of that process and proud to be giving our support. We want everybody to be able to approach it with transparency and with realism. And the only thing that I would add to your comment that it's always a good thing to buy a piece of produce is it's always a good thing to understand where it came from, how it got there, and what went into the thing that you're eating. I think the more mindful we are about food, the better off the planet will be. So I thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.